I'm Dr. Joseph Baker at the Limerick Chiropractic Center, and I want to welcome you for a conversation on bone density. Now, many are thinking about, well, what in the world does chiropractic have to do with bone density? Well, like anything else, we have to understand how the body works to understand how it can be effective. And in turn, if we don't start out with the simple premise of, well, how does it work? Well, then we don't ever know how taking advantage of the principles that chiropractic uses can help you build better bones. Now, listen, we're not going to bore ourselves tonight with a lot of statistics and a lot of numbers, going through a lot of different tables demonstrating how broken people are today. I think we all know that. We all know that, hey, listen, that in the end, we get to see commercials on TV talking about different formulas by which they're capable of chemically producing and stimulating the body to create bone. Now, does anybody ever think that we don't have a problem if we're being marketed to millions and millions of dollars being spent teaching and telling you that there is a chemical solution for the problem? That should let you know there's a lot of problem out there to be solved, because somebody is willing to spend a lot of money to make a lot of money to solve a problem. Well, I'm always reminded, the best problem to have is the one that you never have to deal with. Tonight, my hope is that, hey, listen, as we have this conversation, we talk about things, guess what? You're going to help figure out a way that you're going to be able to do one or two things differently, which will enable you not to ever find yourself in that position where you're going to have to deal with bone loss, poor bone density. So, what is bone density? Well, really simply, it's just simply a measure of the amount of mineral that's within the bone structure itself. We don't have to overcomplicate it. It's like anything else. We could talk about, all of the different levels and the composition of bone. In the end, it really boils down to how much mineral is there, and particularly the calcium and the phosphorus that form the bone itself. Now, let me remind you right now that, when we look at bone, I want you to realize it's not like a cinder block. That's what it's not like. We're going to talk about all the things that it's like in a few minutes. It's not like a cinder block. The cinder block it's firm, it's dense, it's non-porous. Well, it's porous a little bit, but you know what? It doesn't change. Bone is a living, breathing piece of tissue within our body, and guess what? It can be changed. This is how wonderfully we've been blessed, is to know that, hey, listen, we're not stuck the way we are. Oftentimes people think that all the time when they walk into a chiropractic office and they see how badly broken their x-rays are, or they look and how badly broken their spine is, they think, oh, I'm broke and I have to be this way the rest of my life. The answer is no. That's not the case. And in fact, it's very similar to when we start talking about bone density. Not only can we lose bone density, but we can also grow bone density. Now, I do love these pictures here. And as we look at these pictures and as they're going across here, we recognize the fact that, they don't all look the same. And in fact, that normal, healthy bone just looks much denser. There aren't those pockets that are in there. Not as many. And in fact, as we go into things like osteopenia, where we start losing a little bit of the bone mineral, we start seeing how those openings start to become a little bit wider. There's less of that product or that material between those different pockets. Now, when we get to osteoporosis, guess what? All of a sudden, we have larger and larger cavities within the bone itself. Well, listen, we don't want those larger cavities. We want those smaller, denser little pockets That's what we want. That's what we desire. You know, and as we measure bone density, well, you know, the reason why, you know, these structures are up here, you know, these are common structures that we look at as far as, you know, places within the body to measure the bone density. Now, maybe tonight, you know, at the end of this workshop, you know, one of the things that you're going to proclaim is, you know, I don't know what my bone density is. Well, let's deal with reality right away, okay? We're going to jump right to the end. My hope is that, hey, listen, you're going to take one thing that you're going to do, one thing that you are either going to engage in or change in order to actually produce that positive momentum for yourself. That thing that's going to allow you to protect yourself. Now, you notice how I said that's one thing. Not 100 things, not 10 things. I don't want a top 10 list. At the end, when you like this video, when you leave your comment, when you share it, there should only be one thing in there. That one thing that you're going to do. Because if we're not proclaiming, there's no way that we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And that's that very first step. Is coming to the realization that we need to funnel it down to one thing so we can focus our energy there. But then is that proclamation. That proclamation that allows us to take that first positive step forward in reaching those goals. Because if not, if we don't put a timeline, if we don't put action into it, it's just simply a wish. So, like I said, maybe your big takeaway is not only going to be, I need to get tested so that I know, so that I could put numbers into this equation, but also, when are you going to get tested? Are you going to schedule it next week? Are you going to get around to it in the beginning of the year? Are you going to hope that you get it done sometime in 2023? Well, like I said, without a date, without a timeline, it is literally just a hope and a dream. It's an action when we put that date in there. Now, like I said, we want to see nice, dense bones. And when we start talking about it, a lot of people describe healthy-looking bone different ways. Sometimes it looks like a honeycomb. Sometimes, you know, it looks like, you know, really, really tiny Swiss cheese that has really tiny holes. Listen, however you want to picture it, I'm just going to tell you. Really tiny, tiny pockets with a lot of bone material surrounding them. The problem with osteoporosis is, yes, the outer shell is there, the outer piece of bone is there, but on the inside, it's a hollow cavity. Those pockets could become larger and larger and larger. And the problem is that, just like anything else, we don't see the problem until it's too late. Even in our chiropractic office, when we take x-rays and we get to look at some of these bone structures, chiropractic x-rays are not designed specifically to measure bone structure. They're designed to help us understand subluxation, your posture. Yes, we can see the fact that you lost bone, that you are osteopenic or osteoporosis, but you have to lose at least 30% of your bone structure before it even shows up on a chiropractic x-ray. That's why we refer patients for bone density tests and DEXA scans, so that they're capable of getting that accurate measurement to know exactly where they're starting from. In the end, we recognize the fact that when we lose bones, not just females, males, you guys are out there, let me tell you, osteoporosis, osteopenia is just as much of a problem for men as it is for women. Let me say it again, because there's probably a lot of you out there saying, well, this doesn't apply to me. It's like, well, let me shake my head now. It absolutely does. You know, in today's day and age where we're taking in so many different types of chemicals, we're consuming so many different types of drinks and making bad choices. The problem is our body doesn't care. If you create the right chemical shift, the right chemical tide, that's what's going to happen. Your inborn intelligence is going to do exactly what it needs to do to neutralize what that bad stuff does to your system. So yes, we are what we eat. We are what we consume. We definitely are what we put on our body. And yes, your body is going to protect you. It's going to do everything possible to protect you, including releasing calcium, releasing other minerals from the bone in order to make sure that you're being protected. Not okay. Because you know what? When you add really bad choices like that with other risk factors like thyroid problems, other calcium deficiency issues, steroid use, different types of cancers, celiac disease, and rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, just to name a few things that are largely inflammatory in nature. When we do those things, and we have those things existing in our body, and we make those bad choices, guess what's happening? Oh, something bad gets worse much, much more quickly. Your body doesn't care how old you are. All it knows is that once this thing has taken off, once it gains a head of momentum, guess what happens? Oh, it is going to spiral downhill so very quickly. In fact, we see this all the time because, unfortunately, as we see postural changes in individuals, and I say individuals because, again, it's not just you ladies, it's your husbands, it's men also that do the same thing. As we wear down the bone, yes, our posture changes. That's that outside representation of what's going on inside. Our posture is a window into our spine and our nervous system. Too many people, they see it in the mirror, they just don't know how to interpret it. So maybe that very first thing that some of you are going to do is not just recognize the importance of your chiropractic care, but also recognize that there are people around you that when you look at their posture, that sick posture, you come to recognize it means sick health. And sick health to the bone, as well as the rest of the system. So maybe it is that you share this information. Maybe it is that you give them the hope of not recognizing, I don't have to get worse than I am. Recognizing that there is hope for me not to continue down this bad road. Now you might find when you have problems with your bone density that just simple everyday activities become harder and harder and harder. It shows up in a lot of different ways. Your activities of daily living, just getting up and your self-care, getting yourself dressed and cooking and cleaning, all of these things become so much more difficult, including stuff like maintaining your balance and when you fall, creating damage that could lead to a fracture of a hip or a broken leg. And you know what? Listen, when you don't think it happens, I hear these stories all the time. See, the sad thing is that, unfortunately, once we fall, we're falling. And our body weight gains and accelerates until that momentum is stopped by the ground. And if the bone is not dense, if it doesn't have the ability to absorb, it's going to break. And we've talked about the effects of hip fractures before and how it leads to really, really bad problems, including an early demise. It's not something in this conversation today. But let's recognize that whenever we get to that crisis point, even worse things are going to be happening. So I guess the next question is, how does chiropractic help? How does chiropractic benefit those that engage it and use it in order to protect themselves from osteoporosis? Well, the one thing that we recognize is that laws of nature, they don't care who you are. We all know the law of nature of gravity. And I could take a set of keys and I could jingle them up here and let them go, and every time I release them, they're going to just simply drop to the ground. Nobody's going to debate that. Last time I checked, they're never going to fly away. They're always going to go straight on down. All right? They might land a little bit differently depending upon how I release them. But gravity, that law of nature, well, that's going to be impacting those keys every time I release it. Likewise. There's another law. It's called Wolff's Law. In fact, I would encourage you, about 4 months ago, we went through a more detailed class, about a 15, 20-minute conversation about Wolff's Law to help people understand how it helps in growing bone density. It helps in protecting. See, Wolff's Law doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't care, what your status happens to be. What it does know is that the more pressure that we put on that bone structure, the more dense that bone structure is going to be. Now, when that spine is in proper alignment, what that means is that Wolff's Law is going to form more bone evenly across those joints. And yes, we get to use weighted physical activity, whether it's walking up and down the steps, whether it's doing other type of, gym activities. We get to use those things in order to put stress into the bone, to grow bone to become denser. And it doesn't matter who we are, it doesn't matter our age, we're capable of using that law of nature to help ourselves grow bone. Fantastic. We're not stuck. We can make other changes, but let's just talk about the fact that as we're getting adjusted and we're fixing and correcting this alignment, well, our body stops developing that arthritis. That arthritis develops because there's excess stress on those joints. Spurs stop because your body is more balanced. In turn, that proper balance leads to bone growing in the right places. In fact, one of the problems with most osteoporotic patients is they get that in their head and they start to limit everything. They start to limit their range of motion. They start to limit, different choices that they make. And they, amongst anybody, need to engage in life even more so. Because that old adage, if you don't use it, you'll lose it, it absolutely holds true. And you make a bad situation even worse when we stop doing things that facilitate better movement in our body. So I'm going to encourage you. You know what? You need to find those things that are going to help you stay active. And in fact, we recognize that your chiropractic care is one of those things that's safe and it's effective and it allows you to keep that mobility. One of the worst things that happens when we have subluxations is the fact that in the end, the subluxation causes the joint not to move properly. When it stops that proper motion, well, not only does the disc not get to be fed because we have to pump fluid into the disc, but on top of it, the arthritis continues to worsen. The spurs form off the front and the back of the vertebrae because, well, there's pressure in the wrong places. Your adjustment, as it's freeing up that motion, it allows you to not only have that greater range of motion, but for the joint, it stops the arthritis, it stops the spurs from continuing to worsen, it protects the disc because they're capable of being fed, and then finally, overall, it's going to enable the body to increase the bone density. What an amazing thing. One simple thing that affects the health of the spine, that affects the health of all the different joints in the body. That one thing that helps to allow for the body to function better and easier. We recognize that in the end, it's safe and it's effective, and yet, most people are totally unaware of what chiropractic brings to the table. It allows that inborn intelligence that's within each and every one of us. And just like if we dug into talking about the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts that are within the bone cells or that are part of the bone structure that enable us to not only repair bone but also maintain bone, well, these are under control from your nervous system. And sadly, when we have subluxations, even the communication that allows those cells to work properly comes to a grinding halt. I want you to recognize that your chiropractic care is not just about low back pain. It's not about headaches. It's not about, neck pain no. The health of your body is in direct proportion to the health of your spine and your nervous system. And in turn, when you're improving the health of that spine, it is capable of improving the health of the entire body. And listen, when we're using those laws of nature to our benefit, we get to experience all of the blessings because we're making those better choices. Now, very simply, I'm just going to ask you. I'm going to ask you, what you took away from this conversation tonight. Like I said, some of you are going to take away the fact that you need to just simply get checked. Others are going to realize the fact that, hey, listen, you know what? Maybe there's aspects of my diet or the things I'm putting into my body or onto my body that I need to look more closely at. For some, maybe it's getting away from the fear that's keeping them from engaging in the activities that allow for their body to actually be built and grown stronger and healthier. You know what? For many of you out there, listen, there's going to be that one thing. And I'm going to ask you, pause, make sure that you like this video. But I want to see, what's that one thing that you're taking away? What's the one thing that you want to start working on? Remember, this is that action step. It's not a wish, it's not a dream. We're going to create that action step. Because I'm going to ask you, when are you going to want to start doing that? If it's getting a test done, when are we going to get that set up? When do you desire to make sure that it's getting completed? For some of you, maybe if it's a dietary change, it's when do I plan on first assessing how I'm feeding, how I'm fueling my body. For each one of us, I think that most important thing is not just that proclamation of what I'm going to do, but on top of it, it's making sure that we're sharing this with our friends. Sharing this with people that know us and are capable of actually looking into this and recognizing that we need their help. We need their help from encouragement. But in the same respect, they're looking at this and they're going to recognize there are things that they don't know that you know, and they're going to want to ask questions. I love the fact that in the moment of us just simply sharing this information, we have that opportunity of affecting the lives of others that are all over this country, all over this world. Because they get to learn vicariously through the information that we get to see and through our takeaways. And the hope is that we get to help save them from experiencing the heartache of having to turn to drugs and medications and shots in order to help to just simply preserve that bone density. I'm Dr. Joseph Baker from the Limmer Chiropractic Center.